Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's amazing webinar about creating sustainable technology solutions. We are so excited that you have chosen to spend your afternoon with us today for an amazing session. I have some awesome guests here that I'm going to be bringing up here very shortly. So make sure, ladies and gentlemen, if you are attending, feel free to go ahead and let us know where you're from and all that wonderful stuff. So we want to know who we have in this session. So just take a few minutes, seconds if you can, type in your name, what district you're from, what county, what part of the country, anything. Let us know. Heck, you can even tell us who you're rooting for in the NBA Finals. I'll take that. All right, everybody. So today I'm going to be your moderator. My name is Dr. Adam Phyall. I am the Director of Professional Learning and Leadership for All for Ed. I have been in this role since December. Prior to that, I was working in Newton County Schools in Covington, Georgia, also known as the Hollywood of the South. Yes, it is. It's a real thing. You can look it up and Google it if you don't believe me. But you didn't come here to see me. No. I have some amazing guests that I'm going to be bringing up, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves right now. So without any further ado, let me get away from here and let's see who all we have on the screen right now. All right, we have our amazing panelists right here, and I'm going to go through there, and each one of them will get a chance to introduce themselves to you today.
Hello. I am Tracy Daniel Hardy, Director of Technology for Gulfport School District in Gulfport, Mississippi.
Woo woo. Mississippi, the SIP.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rob Dickson. I'm Chief Information Officer for Wichita Public Schools.
All right, Kansas. Now I have to ask you, do you have a lot of tornadoes or anything out in Kansas? I mean, do you get Dorothy jokes all the time being in Kansas?
Yeah, there's no place like home.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brandi Steckel, and I'm coming out of South Carolina. I work for Amazon Web Services, and I've specifically focused on AWS Marketplace and helping education customers with procurement solutions.
Awesome. And you know what? I'm actually from South Carolina myself. So I was born in Charleston. My family are in the Greenville area right now. So that is home for me of sorts. And once again, today's webinar would not be possible without, of course, Future Ready Schools and our amazing friends at AWS. So make sure you check out all of their resources. AWS, you have URLs at the bottom, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you have to step away from any moment during this conversation, don't worry. This will be recorded and it will be shared with you at a later date. So once again, please, if you have to mute, something happens. I know some of you are still at work right now where you're watching this. Feel free. It'll be recorded and shared with you. Also, throughout this session, if you want to ask any questions, make sure you go ahead and throw those into the chat and I'll be able to share them for our panelists. Like I said, like right now, I'm going to go ahead and shout out Heidi. What's going on? Yep. You see how you came up on the screen so everybody knows I put that out there. Let's see. We have Colleen. Hey, Colleen. I should have went with Colleen first and then Heidi. But, you get the idea there. So feel free if you have any questions for any of our panelists as we're having this conversation, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll throw them out there and have our thing going. So I'm going to start with the hardest question of this panel. And I know this is why you came. We want to talk about candy real quick. I mean, yeah, we're going to get to the procurement piece, but I want to talk about candy. So let me ask you, panelists, looking at this picture, what is the worst candy? If somebody gave you this candy for Boss's Appreciation Day or something, you kind of look at them like, you really don't like me, do you?
Raisinets.
Ooh, Raisinets.
Yeah,
I agree.
I like
Raisinets
raisins and chocolate, just not together.
Raisinets are definitely the worst candy pictured here.
Yes.
But I'd say there's one on there, or one that's not on there that's the worst is Necco wafers. It's just like,
yeah,
it looks like it's going to be a jumbo Smartie, but it's not.
yeah, I know the ones you're talking about. I was like, oh, these are so, yeah.
No,
yeah, I don't know what that taste is. All right, what you got, Rob?
I'm going to have to go with Gobstoppers.
Gobstoppers?
it's when you want to like chomp into it and you can't, you're going to break your teeth. And
yeah,
when you get my age, Adam, those are things you got to worry about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. For me, looking at the list, I have to go with good and plenty. I don't know what that candy actually is. I actually had to look it up as some kind of licorice with a coating on the outside. All I'm going to say this: if good and plenty is your favorite candy, we now know a lot about you. That's all I'm going to say. We know a lot about you. Okay, you can take that good, bad, or different. We know a lot about you, but that's neither here nor there. Let's kind of dig into some of our questions, because the reason you came here is to hear from our panelists. So, panelists, and with this one, we're just going to kind of just go around and let it happen organically with our conversation. So, let me just ask you this: how do you determine the technology needs of a school system? Say, Rob, we want to get started stuff there.
I would say pre-pandemic, I had a whole different philosophy around this. Like, we had a committee that would go through and we actually would define the computing needs of end users, or figure out like what requirements, really kind of going through what requirements were needed. I would say post-pandemic, it's really operationally trying to reconfigure the system to work towards a different end goal than what we had before. So it's working your way in reverse than what I'm used to. And I would say that's just circumstantially what I'm dealing with today, in which it's a very different process than what I had pre-pandemic, right? I was thinking very intentionally, and now I'm in a responsive mode. And there's a need to create a different environment that has different requirements than what I had pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have an appreciation of the responsive mode, but we still have a pretty formal process. It's a collaboration between, of course, all of the principals, federal programs coordinator, Department of Instructional Programs, and of course, finance, and myself as director of technology. And so based on what we have decided in our curricular box, whatever the main focus is, then we build out the technology around that to support those initiatives. And we will meet with the principals and give them a survey after our assessment of their technology posture, and then tell them, based on what we know you need to do, here are the things that you need to prioritize. And so we move forward with that, and that list of prioritization is shared with everybody who will participate in that budget meeting with that principal in preparation for the upcoming academic year. And of course, there are little things that happen in between. Some things you say yes to, some things you say, no, that's not in our box, and a lot of times, some of the school administrators have a more difficult time saying no to those teachers in the classrooms when they want to purchase some new cool app. But we have to look closely at the app to see if it's going to conflict or do the same thing as something else that we're already supposed to be using. With that word we hate, the F word we hate, fidelity.
Because that's always that weird. It's always that weird balance you have to have with that wants and needs, because sometimes as people who are responsible, we're like, I know what you need, but it's not necessarily what they want.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to give in, to what they need, what they want, even if when the need is met, just to kind of, make sure that they have some ownership and participation in the process. You don't want to be the one who's always cracking the whip. They got to have some of the things that they want as well.
Coming
so let me
at
ask you
it
this,
from a
Brandi.
vendor standpoint, I was going to just say, coming at it from a vendor standpoint, we tackle these, helping school districts from a very similar perspective to what Tracy was saying, kind of starting first at the overarching goals or problems that you're trying to solve, and then looking at several factors, including resources available, and that includes people and funds as well as time, and from there making recommendations of, well, You could build a solution that's exactly, you know, customized to identically to what you want, or you could buy a solution that's already built, that you wouldn't have to support yourself. And that's kind of the thought process that we take to kind of make recommendations, you know, once districts have done the process that Tracy's described.
Well, let me ask you this, Brandi, from the vendor side of things. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to basically tell a district to pump the brakes? Like, so, you know, they'll think they need something and they're like, oh, we need this. And you're kind of like, well, unless you're going to be NORAD and launching rockets into space, you probably don't need that. Let's look at this instead.
Yeah, there's one instance in particular that comes up a lot. Clearly, schools have a really important critical resource that they have to protect, and that's student data. And so one thing that happens a lot is, you know, cloud providers usually have different kind of versions of their cloud. And for AWS, we have commercial cloud, we have gov cloud. And one thing that does happen a lot is we have school districts saying, I have student data that is critical for us to protect. I need gov cloud. And so that's something that we really have to work through a lot, because the reality is it's going to be more expensive. And if we really examine the security measures that school districts have to take to protect student data, our commercial cloud, when deployed properly, meets all of those requirements. So that's an instance where I say, yeah, it might look like you want to go with the, you know, the absolute, you know, highest level of security, but we can kind of balance and meet your needs while saving you money by going over in this direction. So that'd be one example, Adam, of a time where I would say, you know, wants and needs are what's in your best interest. You might, you know, there might be a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, I know I was working with a district, and they were working on their infrastructure. And they literally put access points in every classroom, pretty much every 6 feet in their building. They were hanging access points, and they were wondering why they were having trouble getting devices connected. I was like, okay, let me get my tinfoil hat and put on my head, because I think I'm getting a signal just walking in here. All right, so let me ask you this, and we'll start. Tracy, you can start with this one for me. When you start looking at your devices and or your just technology solutions, what role does the life cycle assessment play in selecting and evaluating your products?
So, you know, I would say many districts, you know, use Chromebooks for student devices, and we kind of know that Chromebooks 3 to 4 years, you know. And depending on the specs that you select for your Chromebook, it will last you a little bit longer. But you already know going into it is 3 to 4 years. And so what we do is we'll say, okay, to be on the safe side, we're going to look at having to replace those devices every 3 years. If you have it another year, then that works well. So when we sit down and talk to our administrators, we tell them, knowing that, plan to replace those devices, a third of all of your devices every year, so that you can continue, you know, to make sure that you have those devices, you know, that you need for the things that you need. But when we're specifically talking about life cycle, Adam, and I did look this up, you're talking about the goal and scope and the inventory analysis, the impact assessment and interpretation. And what I just mentioned is our process for, you know, Chromebook replacement encompasses all of those things, a part of the life cycle. We have a little different process for, you know, laptops. They can last you, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 years. I'm using a 9-year-old device right now, and it's working very, very well. I just had to replace the keyboard on it. And then, you know, when we have the Mac Labs and then the MacBooks, those may look a little bit differently too. So it just depends on what solution that you're working with, and also how you're going to use that solution. And so you may be required to, you know, replace that particular device sooner than you know, planned on, because of the particular programs or such that you're using.
Yeah, that is something you really have to consider, or that hardware or software component, because sometimes, as you mentioned, a computer or a laptop, I mean, it may still be going, but hardware wise, I mean, software, they've outdated that hardware, and so now you're kind of in that situation where it works, but it's not going to work or not meet whatever safety and security standards you have moving forward.
And
Rob,
that's
would you like to add to that? Oh,
conversation to have
yeah.
with people who are not in tech, who don't really understand that. They're like, it's still working. So why do we need to replace it? It's still working, but it's not working optimally for the program that you want to use, or you can't get the updates that you need on that particular device in order for it to work optimally. And sometimes that becomes a little bit of a battle when they're trying to save money, and you kind of understand where they're coming from, but you still have to do the right thing so that the kids can do what they need to do with that device and those programs.
Thanks for that, Rob.
I would say from my standpoint, I'll take the other side. Since Tracy took hardware, I'll take the software side. So we have a software approval process, right? That goes through we've got a tool that outputs to an analytical dashboard. And especially right now, when you think about ESSER, everybody bought all kinds of software solutions. I think it's good to have a reference point of when you started something to see maybe the reason that you implemented that software in the first place. That software is now not meeting the purpose that you made for it. And it could be fixing other things or being used for engagement or other pieces, but maybe that's and a lot of times we purchase software that has a lot of overlap, that as software vendors evolve their software, sometimes there's overlap that gets produced in the life cycle. And so it's great to have a pane of glass to look and see where you can create some efficiencies, because I think inevitably common language is important when we think about the development of human capital and thinking about how we help people along. And I think more than just saving dollars, I think it's if we want to improve digital literacy, both in our workforce and in our students, we've got to create those segments for us to reevaluate where those solutions are for us.
I'll tag on to what Rob had said. And I would say there's also, we're in a time of just complete proliferation of software applications. And I think that a lot of times schools start out kind of adapting a software that wasn't really built particularly for school districts. Maybe it was built for commercial enterprises, but it fulfills their need, or they can kind of adapt to it to make it fulfill their need. And I think, as, renewals come up or those software agreements come to their end, it's worthwhile, as Rob mentioned, not only to assess, hey, is anyone still using this, and is it still meeting, do we still have the need that we had when we started with this? It's also worth looking at, hey, what else has been created since we formed this initial relationship? Is there something that's that's more purpose built for school districts that fulfills our needs even better? So, and a lot of that happens, of course, through the RFP or the competitive bidding process, but I think always kind of opening up and looking around, and then balancing that against how much of this of an internal training lift is this going to be if we take out the old one and put in something new that maybe meets our needs a little better.
Thanks. And I think one thing that's a very simple question that I always encourage people making these kind of decisions to ask the vendors is, how long before I have to replace this? Because that goes into, sometimes we're thinking about this initial purchase, but we have to always be thinking about the next purchase. So if we make this transition, how long is this going to last? How long before I have to write this big check all over again? So really understanding that next question is sometimes the best question we need to be asking in some of these deployments that we're doing. So with that being said, this kind of takes me to the next thing I want to ask everybody. So with these purchases that we're making, let's really frame it around the context of sustainability. Now, sustainability, we can take this a couple ways, and I'm going to let us take it whichever direction our conversation goes. We could talk about sustainability as far as from the ecosystem to making sure that we're being good stewards of our planet, making sure that all of our hardware, we're recycling, we're really reducing our carbon footprint. And also from the nature of being able to sustain what we've purchased within our systems, understanding that it's not just a one-time purchase, that we've bought this, we paid this initial fee. What does it look like year 2, year 3, year 4? To my previous question, when we have to renew it. So with that being said, in the context of ed tech, how do you look at or how would you define sustainability, a sustainable solution?
How about, prioritizing your commitment to use, maintain, or support a solution or process, over a defined period of time, whether it's, 3 years, 5 years, or what have you. And then you can go so far as saying, doing those particular things that will also help to protect the earth and the natural environment for our future generations. So you look at not just, what so many of us have done with ESSER funds is to purchase this big grand thing, something that you can't really possibly sustain after the 3-year cycle or the 5-year cycle, whatever you're on. But how does that look? So if you're going to purchase something, and we try to avoid purchasing, like a million things at one time, so that in 3 years or 5 years, you won't have that amount of money to purchase those million things again. And so you just kind of try to, purchase a little bit at a time so that everything doesn't require renewal at the same time. Don't buy all of your programs at the same time with that one pot of money, because are you going to get that same big pot of money again in 3, 5, or 7 years when it's time to upgrade or replace? So try to be, with one of our board members says, good fiduciaries of taxpayers' money by, budgeting and thinking clearly about how that's going to look over the next few years and future generations, instead of just right now because you have this money to spend.
I think from my standpoint, absolutely agree everything with what Tracy said with fiduciary. And I think about the financial commitments that we have. A lot of times there's just an uncertainty financial wise of where public schools are. I can't guess 5 years from now what that looks like. But I think when you can bring intention into it and work with learning services, like I oversee the virtual school, so I get first, access to some students that are virtually engaging. They also come in once a week. So I love getting those points of view straight from a student and getting that voice. We also have a tech committee, but I also want us to be cognizant of implementation fatigue. And so much of, especially large districts, they'll start an initiative and they'll keep rolling with initiative, and they don't think about the de-implementation of something in order to, like, what's going to fill that gap. And I think, especially right now where you see so much, we've had a land of plenty from ESSER, right? And we're about to hit this area. I think many school districts need to just become intentional about the convergence and what do we de-implement. And that could be, it doesn't have to be a piece of software, right? It could be an initiative that we've put in place that might not have an impact on student learning that we're seeing in data that really could free up some mental space or time or other efficiencies that we don't think about. I think so much in technology, we focus on professional development and finance, and we don't think about as much the time and effort that it takes as a resource for our end users to either adopt or de-implement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a great point, Rob. I would say too, on top of those, if you kind of take it from a so it sounds like we've been taking it from a very sustainability in terms of budget. There are some other options too. If there is a, from a cloud perspective, if you are trying to move from on-prem to cloud, but then say, okay, if we use our ESSER funds to make that move to the cloud, is it going to be sustainable? Will we have the OpEx money coming in to be able to really sustain that environment? And I think a lot of times it's a mix of kind of a close collaboration with the finance team, sometimes with policymakers, but there are also companies that specialize in helping public sector customers make this move, and basically taking equipment that's no longer being used, disposing of it in an environmentally sustainable way, and then using the money that they get from that, whether it's resale or something else, to fund cloud programs. So when you're kind of trying to make that move, it's looking at how much are we going to save, how much are we going to have to invest in resources, time, and are there other programs past ESSER that can continue to fund this?
Definitely, because having that funding is going to either make or break your initiative, no matter which way you go on this. Right. Now, one thing that I saw, Rob, one district did, to your point of when you start getting rid of things, they actually had tombstones made for various initiatives that they had in their district. And these weren't just tech things. So like, reading first or something. So they literally had little tombstones built. When they did their back to school thing, they put them up there so all the teachers could see these things are dead and gone. And then they had them in their break rooms. So people would knew that this is dead and gone. Don't talk about it. Don't say it's something else that we've added. We're not using it anymore. And I thought that was a kind of cute way to get people to realize that these things aren't in the system anymore. So when you are implementing something else new, they won't have to say, oh, we have this and this and this and this. It's like, no, some of those are gone. You're bringing us something 10 years ago. That's not our initiative. So with that, and you kind of started talking about this, when you start trying to get these sustainable technology solutions, what are some of those challenges that a district could face in this process? Of course, people will fight change at times. So we do know that. So what are some ways that you've been able to combat that from a district side? And Brandi, what are some resources that you may suggest to a district if they are getting a little pushback on a change? Because sometimes this is from your own tech people. If you're starting to move things to the cloud, somebody's like, well, I don't want it there, or you may have to dispel some rumors about where your data is going to live now. It's not going to be in China or Russia. That's not how it works. But just what are your thoughts on that?
I can start that out. Absolutely. So I think some of the biggest challenges are just misconceptions and discomfort in change to a new model. So I'll give you, I think, continuing kind of from the last conversation around budget, one of the biggest ones for K-12 schools is a move when you're going to something that's more sustainable in a lot of ways. So for instance, on-prem software, where you have static costs for licenses or annual amounts, pretty dependable how much they're going to be, to a cloud environment where you pay for what you use. It's going to be much cheaper, but the pay-as-you-go model makes a lot of K-12 leaders nervous because, I think as Rob and Tracy have both mentioned, you can't guarantee budget 5 years out, and there's always the what if we go higher than we have budget for. And so we have at AWS a lot of tools, one to help you estimate your costs, so get to a point where you have a pretty good grip on what this is going to cost, even in the most expensive months. Probably August is one of the most expensive because it's back to school time. All of your servers are getting hit. Your website's really getting a lot of traffic. So seeing what that looks like over time, we have tools to estimate that out. And then from a software perspective, AWS Marketplace, our marketplace has a ton of tools, thousands of softwares that you can try do a free trial of, make sure you're liking it, and then map out, what is that metered cost going to be. So you still get the benefit of pay as you go, but you get some kind of assurance that, okay, we're not going to we can safeguard ourselves, and we're not going to overspend on this. We truly are going to save money.
I would say, a lot of the challenge is about what drive is it. When I think about the last 3 years, a lot of the drive has been security posture. So we forklifted our finance, student information, like every system you can think of. We host 25% of our data center today. The rest of it's either in AWS or Azure or Oracle Cloud. And so when I think about that drive, right, it could be cybersecurity risk and posture. That's a very different drive than trying to change how learning happens. And I think those are waves that affect public education directly that I don't think we understand the stress that it puts on the system, right? And so whether that be moving all your faculty to multi-factor, and we're doing our secondary students in the fall. And so when you think about those drives, I think we need to be very mindful that there are a lot of waves of stresses that are pushing us one way or another. And sometimes those are good for the learning environment, and sometimes those are challenges within themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say a different challenge would be that those who desire the solution don't fully understand how things are procured. They don't understand that, I just saw this and this is great and I want to use this right now. It needs to be something that is research-based, something that doesn't conflict with what we already have, something that aligns with our strategic plan. And strategic goals. Something else is that, when it's strategic planning time and the goals kind of shift, then what do you do, about the technology plan or process that you currently have in place? How do you shift while, finding a way to continue to use those devices? And one of the things we do look at closely, and we don't get much pushback from it now as we used to, is to, make sure that we're not buying devices or solutions that are singular, that just do one thing. They need to be able to do other things. And they'll, even if they don't cost very much, they still need to be able to be useful should that program or whatever die. So, of course, budget and funding priorities and how all of that will affect, the environment, the students, not just right now, but later as well. So.
That's great points that y'all brought up there. One thing I wanted to touch on, Rob, you spoke about moving things to the cloud. And here's one thing: as we become more and more technical in nature, there is probably not one thing in your district that's not connected to the network in some shape, form, or fashion. From your POS systems and your cafeteria, that's your point of sale people. You have those set up, and then even I know when I left my district, we had set up our gas systems for our school buses to connect that to our network too. So all these things are connected, but it doesn't make sense to host all that stuff on-prem now. When everyone else is moving to the cloud, you can move it to a cloud service, and there is a finite number of individuals who can manage that and keep it secure in school systems. And when you talk about every school system, in theory, needs their own cybersecurity network, there's not enough people at the skill level in our country to fill that need. So if you can offload that onto a partner to do some of that work for you, that heavy lifting, where if something gets compromised, I kind of want to be like, hey, it's not me. I'm gonna call this company because they're hosting it, because I don't even know where to start. We're trying to find some of this stuff, it makes it a little bit easier when you have a partner. And I know this is AWS. I'm just like, it's AWS is on the line. That has done the work and that can keep some of it, can keep your information and data secure. Whether you choose the government or the business plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's, and that going back to what we were talking about earlier, when we're, shifts in mental models, still there are a lot of people out there who feel like their data and all that information is going to be more secure if it's in a closet or a building where they can go touch it themselves. But the thing about it is, if you can go touch it, other people can too, and and you're really best off, working with someone who has just invested, all of their resources in making sure that that physical area is secure, and it is has very, very few, if any, points of failure, whose whole business is security of that environment.
So you're telling me I shouldn't keep my data under my mattress?
Yeah, it's the equivalent of of burying your life savings in your backyard.
In the backyard, yeah.
But I got a map and everything with an X on it, so I can make sure that I can find it. Okay. So the next question that I want to ask everybody with this is, which kind of goes great to what we were just talking about. How can school systems and vendors work together to co-design products or solutions that meets the needs of the educators and the students? Because sometimes, we have in our mind how something should work. And, as a vendor, you're like, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. But, how do we find that happy medium where to ultimately do what's best for our educators and our students? Rob, go ahead and start us off with this.
I'd like to chime in on a little bit of what Brandi said. I think many times vendors are coming to us that have created applications for enterprise and they don't understand how school districts work. And that could be around data modeling. It could be around rostering. It could be around even the feature set. Like I remember when we still work with Microsoft on Microsoft Teams and the TAP program. And, that's a different solution than it was whenever I first saw it, right? And I think about where we're at, even as AWS, our student information system sets in AWS today. AWS as a feature set is very different than it was when we placed our SIS there a couple of years ago. I think it's having that back and forth conversation. It's not I'm buying this and I'm just going to renew it. It's I'm buying this and I'm informing you on how I need this to improve both the education setting and how we work, but also the feature set that's needed for us to succeed. And I think that's a very different relationship than just buying a piece of software.
Tracy?
So basically, Rob said what I was going to say. It's just a collaboration. We have to collaborate with one another. It's not just give and take. We have to be able to sit down and have those conversations. We also have to have some assurances that you have educators on staff who understands, how the school business works and who can contribute to the development of those products and services that you offer. We have some great vendors that we partner with. They're often calling to ask, us, what do we think about this? How is this working for you? How do you use that? And, personally, you kind of get tired of answering the same questions, but you have an appreciation for the questions because you know that they're trying to make the products and services that they offer better for us. And so whenever we have a particular need that is not being offered in whatever we have, but we like the product overall, we can simply reach out to someone that we know there. And so those relationships are very important to express to them why we want it this way and how it might help others as well. Additionally, having conversations like that with your state organizations, like your For us, as the Mississippi Educational Technology Leaders Association, we meet quarterly, have conversations there on the listserv. And if more than just your district needs that, then, everybody can have that conversation. You can even bring them in to our meetings and we can talk about it and see how they might be able to make some changes, to what we currently have or what they're offering to better meet the needs as we're forecasting what we might need later.
Great point there.
I would add that it's critically important especially if you're looking to contribute any large amount of budget, or if it's a software or technology solution that's going to be critical to meeting one of your goals, that you have that with the vendor, and that it's continual, not just a part of getting in the door and making the sale, but they're genuinely iterating their product based on customer feedback. I think that that's a really critical piece. A different way I would take this is that even in this world where we have all these purpose-built applications, sometimes there's not exactly what you want. And I think in those instances it might be worth, if you have people on staff who are builders and developers, able to create your own solution. That's becoming easier and easier to do in the cloud, or sometimes to hire a systems integrator to create what you want for you. I know it's going to result in more maintenance and more cost along the line, but sometimes it's becoming more cost effective to do that. And there are instances where what you want hasn't been built, so it's now an option. You don't just have to go buy some software that was built for the enterprise and try and adapt it to your needs. We see lots of innovation Kickstarters out there that do exactly that. AWS has an innovation center in Arizona that's a collaboration with a university and startups that are really specialized in creating something that's purpose built, where we tackle real world problems that there's not a software created yet, and help create it. So I think that's it's maybe not something that you see K-12 school districts doing a ton right now, but in the instance that Tracy mentioned, if there's something that's a need that a lot of districts have, and if it's not fulfilled by something that already exists, it's worth looking into.
Okay. The great point we have. And remember, you are an active participant in this as well, all your attendees there. So if you want to have a question, a comment, or you want to share something, feel free to make a comment and it may be up on the screen. Alethea, Master, we are always asking teachers, students, admin for ideas on how we can make their experience with our product better. A lot of times folks are hesitant to make the ask. That's what you got to do sometimes. Just ask. And when you make that ask, things happen. Something else to keep in mind, a lot of different partners and vendors, and this is to your point, Tracy, they do have these user groups where if you are a part of it, they have these groups where they get certain users together, talk about workarounds or solutions that they have. And if you are a partner with your company that you're getting something from, ask, do they have a partner group that you can be a part of, that you can share ideas, because that's how we work together and make these products better in our spaces. So it kind of takes us to the next question I want to pose to the group. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. I have to say AI. I think that's the rule. Anytime you have a webinar or a tweet or something, you have to throw AI out there because everyone's talking about it. So how can schools balance the need to stay up to date with the latest technology? Because there's always something new out there. I'm sure AWS has a whole bunch of stuff now with some additional AI stuff people didn't know about. It's probably, but here's the thing also, everybody listening, we all know AI has been around for years, for decades. We're just getting a different version for the consumer use now. So with that being said, how can schools manage the cost to stay up to date, and then also investing in these solutions that are going to be sustainable? Let's see. Brandi, how about you start us off? Because
Sure.
you guys are coming up with all this new stuff.
Yeah, you know what? I would say one is looking into like competitive marketplaces. So a lot of times that's a great place to start looking to really stay up to date with the latest. And I'll give you a for instance. So AWS Marketplace is a third party marketplace and it has software in it. But to your AI example, it also has pre-built machine learning algorithms, for instance. And so one way of really staying up to date without breaking the bank and being able to manage costs is looking to leverage, AI that's already been, mostly built. That way, you're not having to invest in, essentially data scientists. Another way to manage costs, I would say, is cooperative purchasing. For instance, there are nationwide cooperatives out there where they've already, negotiated a favorable financial situation. So looking to leverage those kind of pre-negotiated prices when you're looking at, trying something new or innovative is always a good move as well.
Okay. Just added that AWS Marketplace URL down there, so you can check it out if you want to.
Thank you.
All right, Tracy.
Over the years, we have said that we don't mind being on the cutting edge. We don't necessarily want to be on the bleeding edge. When trying to stay up to date, because sometimes those things on the bleeding edge, while they're cool, they don't really have a tried and true implication for what we're doing. They're on their way, but they're just not there yet. So we got to do our research and stay up to date, stay up to date with some of the social media and periodicals, and I don't think people call them periodicals anymore, but I can't think.
I know. An old joke comes up right now, but I'm gonna leave that alone because I may see you.
And just make sure that we know what's coming and what kind of implications that it will have. I have vendors who have come in and said, they're pushing this one particular thing. And I've said over and over to them, it's cool, but I don't know how we're going to use it yet. It's cool, but I don't know how we're going to use it yet. And then 4 years later, it makes sense then, because not only have you figured out how you could use it, but they've made strides and they've made updates and advances with the technology where it really makes it possible, almost impossible in some instances, to have school without that particular product or service. So we just got to be aware, stay up to date on it. And then another thing, I sitting in my seat cannot make those decisions alone about what I think, they need. We have to have input from those practitioners, those in the classroom that are using it, because it's been many years since I've been in the classroom, and the things that made sense then don't necessarily make sense now. And the things that I would say, oh, they don't need, they definitely need. So I can't just make those decisions alone. I have to talk with, those teachers in the classroom, those principals, and, the people in instructional programs as well, to try to help, decide. And a lot of times I'm just the reviewer, of those things.
I think it starts
Thank
with.
you.
Oh, go ahead.
That's exactly
no, I was just saying.
Your definition. Yeah. That's what I meant, but nobody.
Yeah, I just put that up there for the young kids out there who are watching, in case they didn't know what a periodical was.
Don't make me feel super old.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
I think it starts with awareness. I think there's a level of awareness at every single level that needs to have happen. Definitely having an awareness from a C-suite level, understanding where the district is going direction-wise. I think right now a direction of where our labor force is going to, and looking at, how do we solve some problems that are defining us as a public education institution right now, are I think sometimes when we think about the new things, if we can augment those, whether that be hybrid classrooms or other problems that we've got to tackle, like I think the ROI changes based upon the problem that's presented to you. And I think we've got some very systemic problems that are being shown to us in public education right now that we've got to iterate and understand how we can address the problem. And that becomes sustainable within itself if it's creating the efficiencies needed in time or the efficiencies needed to solve the problem. And I think you'll see those solutions pan out naturally, right? As we've got a lot of knowledge workers in our workforce, because that's our product, right? That's what we do.
Right.
I think you'll see us solve problems utilizing technology in a different way than we have in the last 20 years, only because our level of awareness and digital literacy as a knowledge workforce is very different than it was.
I agree.
God, just giving all this wisdom and knowledge. I mean, once again, we're getting close to the hour, but I want to make sure I just thank everyone here for being able to share your wisdom with everyone who is in attending and who will be watching this later. So shout out to everybody who will be watching this as well. So a couple questions, and we're going to wrap things up. And once again, if you have any questions or comments throughout, feel free to throw them in there, and they may get a chance to get up on the screen for our panelists to see. All right, so panelists, let me get back to the right one. How can schools effectively measure this impact of sustainable technology initiatives on the environment? Because we mentioned that earlier. We talked about student learning and the overall operation. So yeah, we're going to put sustainable technology solutions in place, but you may have that situation where you have to figure out what is your ROI. How would you go about doing it, or how have you gone about doing that?
So we have a program that we're using that came with our Mississippi Connects initiative that is measuring the use of any application that we use, particularly on the Chromebooks. And it looks at who's doing it, how long, what time of the day. And then from that, we can gather that data and we can decide just from that, do we need to renew it? Is it working, or do we need additional training? Do we need to revisit the purpose of using it? Do we need to look at purchasing additional services or supports for that particular program just to get where we need to get? And then also, it's been really glaring that there are a lot more programs being used than we had any idea of. And we've reduced the number of programs in our box greatly, but then there are some other things that are creeping up, and they're not all things that would negatively impact student achievement, but some things are just make the teacher or the staff member more productive. And it may be that we look at that particular thing and expand it to others. And so we are using that particular program and product to measure the effectiveness of, to look at, the usage so that we can then measure the effectiveness or try to determine the effectiveness of some of the programs that we're using and how it's impacting student achievement. That's just one way, and I'll let somebody else talk.
Go ahead, Brandi.
Yeah, I can speak up to this. So I'm going to take this more the environmental route. So environmental sustainability is something that AWS is extremely invested in. And I think it's becoming something that commercial enterprises are regularly measuring themselves on. I think that it's going to become something, and probably is already for a lot of school districts, but will increasingly become something that school districts look to measure themselves on too. And for that, two key measures are carbon footprint and in water sustainability. And so, from just an AWS perspective, we've committed to being carbon neutral by 2025 and are on pace to do that. And use in a data center, you use a lot of water for cooling, and are getting water from renewable sources, as well as investing in water projects and in water-strained communities. These are things that when you're evaluating new vendors, they should be able to tell you about, because as far as ed techs that are building on AWS, for instance, we have tools where they can evaluate their own sustainability and provide actual metrics back to end customers like school districts to be able to tell you, are they sustainable, or do they have some work to do? So I think asking some questions about that it makes sense, and it's something that students care a lot about too. So I think this is also a very cool way to kind of communicate back to students about what the school district is doing, to be as sustainable as possible.
I would say two quick things. One, I love the future ready assessment. I think from a district level, it gives a good kind of where the waters are at. And we do that here in our district. If you go to our website, you can see our future ready plan. Number two, both in Omaha Public Schools and now in Wichita Public Schools, I brought Digital Promise as a partner of Future Ready as well. They have a sustainability toolkit, and they work around research around those touch points of different audiences. So students, community, parents, even teachers and staff and leadership. I love to replicate those pieces, because I think for the rest of our schools, it gives a very good value of where perception is. And many times perception is kind of your reality of how people see the technology that you're implementing. And I think it's important to see where those storylines are coming from, and be able to be very targeted about how you could either change either the language by which you're producing the content that's being delivered to them, or even the frequency, and thinking about what feedback loops do I need to have in order to change the experience that an end user or a student or a teacher, whoever that person might be, what story that they're building based upon the experience that you're giving them.
Thanks again for sharing that. So we are right up at the time. So I'm gonna ask one last thing for my attendees, right? I mean, for my panelists right now. If you could give me your parting shot. This is that. If I'm a sports guy, so this is where you just shot the three, you just have your arm up, walking off the court right now. So let's go ahead and give us your parting shots as we're walking off, on your final thoughts on sustainability of technology solutions. Let's go start us off, Brandi.
All right. I'd say one of the best things that you can possibly do around sustainability of technology solutions is start looking at cloud and cloud-based solutions, and planning, doing some of the initial planning you'd need to figure out how you get there.
There you go. Perfect. All right, Rob.
I think for sustainability, it's looking at the whole life cycle and working your way back. I think you've got to look at even the end point in time when you might replace whatever it is that you're going to do, and think about what supports do I need to have in place to make sure I can meet that end goal.
All right, Tracy.
If we don't consider sustainability in terms of the earth, the environment, our natural resources, then we don't need to do anything else, because it won't be anything left for us. We will be killing ourselves off if we don't consider those things in everything that we do.
All right, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for attending. This webinar was once again brought to you by Future Ready Schools and AWS. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you are following us on the social medias. Follow hashtag Future Ready. Check us out at Future Ready on Twitter, Future Ready Schools on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and enjoy the rest of your day.